There's a square mile in the middle of London that technically isn't even part of London. It has its own laws, its own police force, its own government that predates Parliament itself. And every single day, more money moves through this tiny patch of land than flows through the entire economy of most countries. We're talking about the City of London, not the City of London, the city, capital C. And if you think Wall Street runs the world's financial system, you've been looking at the wrong side of the Atlantic. Here's what most people don't know. When you trade currency in Tokyo, odds are the transaction clears through London. When a Brazilian company wants to borrow in dollars, the paperwork probably goes through London. When oil gets priced, when gold changes hands, when a Russian oligarch needs to move money discreetly, London. This isn't ancient history, this is right now. London handles more foreign exchange trading than New York and Tokyo combined. It's the largest center for international banking in the world, and it does all of this from a fog-soaked island that voted to leave the European Union and sits in a time zone that makes absolutely no sense for Asian or American markets. So how did a rainy city on the edge of Europe become the undisputed capital of global finance? The answer involves pirates, empires, legal loopholes, and one very convenient war. Act 1. The empire built the rails. Let's start with the obvious part. Britain had an empire. At its peak, it controlled a quarter of the world's land and a quarter of its people. India, Australia, chunks of Africa, the Caribbean, Hong Kong, all flying the Union Jack. But empires don't just conquer territory, they build infrastructure. And the infrastructure Britain built wasn't roads or railways, it was financial plumbing. By the mid-1800s, if you wanted to trade cotton from India, sugar from Jamaica, or tea from China, you needed to move money across oceans. You needed credit, you needed insurance, you needed someone to guarantee that a deal made in Calcutta would actually get paid in Liverpool. London became that someone. British banks didn't just finance British trade, they financed everyone's trade. A merchant in Buenos Aires selling wheat to France would route the deal through a London bank because sterling was stable, British courts were predictable, and London had the deepest pool of capital on the planet. The empire created the demand, London created the system to meet it. And here's the clever part. Once you build the infrastructure, you don't actually need the empire anymore. Act 2. The empire dies, but the bank survives. By 1945, Britain is exhausted. 2 world wars, bombed cities, a collapsing currency. India gains independence. The empire starts to unravel. Any normal country would see its financial sector collapse along with its geopolitical power. London did the opposite. Because while Britain was losing colonies, the United States was gaining a problem. After World War II, the dollar becomes the global reserve currency. Everyone wants dollars, and American banks start piling up massive deposits from foreign governments, corporations, and central banks. But here's the issue. Those dollars are subject to American regulations, American taxes, American politics. And in the 1950s, the Soviet Union is sitting on a mountain of dollar deposits. They need dollars to trade, but they absolutely do not want those dollars sitting in New York, where the US government could freeze them during the Cold War. So they ask a simple question: where can we hold dollars outside of America? The answer, bizarrely, is London. Act 3. The Eurodollar market. This is where it gets weird. British banks start accepting dollar deposits and making dollar loans without those dollars ever touching American soil. They're not subject to US banking regulations, not subject to reserve requirements, not subject to interest rate caps. It's the financial equivalent of international waters, and it has a name: the Eurodollar market. The term is confusing because it has nothing to do with the euro, which won't exist for another 40 years. Euro just means offshore, dollars held outside America. And London becomes the center of this new, unregulated, parallel financial universe. American corporations love it. They can borrow dollars in London cheaper than in New York. Foreign governments love it. They can hold dollars without US oversight. And British banks love it because they're suddenly relevant again. By the 1970s, the Eurodollar market is worth hundreds of billions. By the 1980s, trillions. And it's all happening in London. Not because of empire, not because of military power, but because of a legal gray zone that nobody wanted to close. Act 4. The Big Bang. Now we jump to 1986. Margaret Thatcher decides to blow up the old city of London. For centuries, the city had been run like a gentleman's club. Trading was done face-to-face, commissions were fixed, foreigners were politely kept at arm's length. It was cozy, it was profitable, and it was dying. Thatcher deregulates everything in a single day, October 27, 1986. They call it the Big Bang. Suddenly, foreign banks can own British brokers, fixed commissions disappear, electronic trading arrives. The old guard is furious, but the city transforms overnight. American banks pour in, Japanese banks pour in, Deutsche Bank, UBS, all the big players set up massive operations in London, and they bring something vital, capital and talent. But here's what's easy to miss. The Big Bang didn't just open London to foreign banks, it opened foreign banks to London's unregulated offshore markets. You could now trade Eurodollars, Eurobonds, currency swaps, all the exotic instruments that didn't quite fit into the rule books of New York or Frankfurt, and you could do it with the muscle of Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley. London became the place where global finance wrote its own rules. Act 5. The English language and the time zone. There's an unglamorous reason London stayed on top that nobody likes to talk about. English. If you're a banker in Singapore and you want to make a deal with someone in Frankfurt, what language do you use? English. What legal system do you default to? English common law. Where do you file the contracts? Probably London. The entire global financial system essentially runs on legal templates written by British lawyers in the 1800s. They've been updated, sure, but the bones are still there. And then there's the time zone. London sits perfectly between New York and Hong Kong. When Tokyo closes, London is just opening. When New York opens, London still has half a day left. For a few precious hours each day, London overlaps with both Asia and America. If you want to trade currencies or move money across continents in real time, that overlap is everything. It's not romantic, it's not exciting, but it's brutally effective. Act 6. The Offshore Empire. Now let's talk about something darker. Britain might have lost its colonies, but it didn't lose control of them. Not financially. The British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, Jersey, Guernsey, Bermuda. These are British overseas territories or crown dependencies. They have their own governments, but their legal systems tie back to London. And they have one thing in common. They're tax havens. If you want to set up a shell company, hide assets, or move money quietly, you do it in the BVI. And if you want to manage that offshore entity, you hire a law firm in London. It's a system that lets London offer two services at once: squeaky clean financial infrastructure on the surface and discreet offshore arrangements underneath. Estimates suggest trillions of dollars are parked in these jurisdictions. Nobody knows the real number, because that's the point. And London sits at the center of it, acting as the bridge between the legitimate economy and the shadow one. Act 7. Brexit and the question nobody asked. In 2016, Britain votes to leave the European Union. The predictions are apocalyptic. Banks will flee. Frankfurt or Paris will steal London's crown. The city is finished. Except that's not what happened. Some banks moved parts of their operations, some jobs left, but London remains the largest financial center in Europe by a mile. Why? Because the thing that made London powerful was never its access to the EU, it was its access to everywhere else. London didn't become the world's money capital by being inside a political union. It became the capital by being outside the rules. The Eurodollar market thrived because it was offshore. The Big Bang worked because it removed restrictions. The time zone and language would still be there, whether Britain was in the EU or not. Brexit hurt, but it didn't kill the model. And that reveals something uncomfortable. London's power doesn't come from democracy or governance or being particularly good at making things. It comes from offering a space where global capital can operate with minimal friction. That's not a moral statement, it's just the math. Act 8, the competition. Of course, London isn't invincible. New York is still massive, still the home of US capital markets. Hong Kong was rising fast until Beijing tightened control. Singapore is clean, efficient, and increasingly attractive to Asian wealth. And then there's the digital question. If you can settle a trade on a blockchain, do you even need a city? If smart contracts replace legal contracts, does English common law still matter? If stablecoins replace correspondent banking, does the time zone advantage disappear? Maybe. Or maybe London just adapts again, the way it did after the empire fell, the way it did after the Big Bang, the way it did after Brexit. Because the real secret of London's dominance isn't geography or history or even regulation, it's inertia. Once everyone's systems are plugged into the same hub, once all the lawyers and bankers and traders are in the same place, once the infrastructure is built and the relationships are formed, it's incredibly hard to move. You'd have to convince thousands of institutions to simultaneously rewire their operations, to retrain their staff, to renegotiate their contracts. It's possible, but it's expensive, and finance hates expensive. So, here's where we are. A tiny, ancient city within a city, governed by a corporation that predates modern democracy, controls more of the world's money flow than any other place on Earth. It got there through empire, yes, but it stayed there through loopholes, timing, and a willingness to let money move faster than regulators could follow. It's not the capital of the world because it's the best system. It's the capital because it's the most convenient one. And the uncomfortable truth is this: nobody really designed it this way. There was no master plan, no grand strategy. It just sort of happened. One offshore market led to another. One deregulation opened the door for the next. One crisis created an opportunity that became permanent. And now we're left with a system where more money changes hands in a single square mile than in entire continents. You can argue whether that's good or bad, but you can't argue that it's not strange. The world's money capital is a medieval city corporation with its own flag, sitting on an island that just left its closest trade partners, running a financial system that technically exists nowhere and everywhere at once. And every morning, the markets open and the money flows, and London remains. The question isn't whether that will change. The question is, what would it take to make it change? And does anyone actually have the power to answer that?